My name is Captain Rachel Hayes and I am 33 years old. On paper, I've built a career that most people would respect. I served my country overseas, earned commendations for leadership under fire, and now run a successful defense consulting firm out of Washington, D.C. But inside my own family, none of that has ever mattered. To my father, a decorated general with 4 decades in the Army, I've always been the disappointment. The middle child who never quite lived up to his impossible standards. Last Christmas, seated at the head of the table in full uniform like he was still commanding a battalion, my father leveled his eyes at me and said the words I'd felt hanging in the air my entire life. "Rachel, you are the weakest link in this family." The room went silent. That was the night I finally broke my silence. Before I go any further, drop in the comments where you're watching from. And if holiday dinners in your family have ever felt more like a battlefield than a celebration, hit that like button and subscribe. You're going to want to hear this. I grew up just outside Fort Bragg, North Carolina. From the beginning, my siblings had clear roles in my father's army-like household. My older brother, Daniel, was the golden child, the natural athlete who went straight into West Point. My father bragged about him to anyone who would listen, lining the living room shelves with his trophies and medals. Our weekends were consumed by his football games, his ROTC awards, his every accomplishment. Then there was my sister Caroline, the picture-perfect daughter in my father's eyes. She married young to another officer, had children quickly, and slipped neatly into the role of the respectable Army wife. My father would never miss a chance to highlight her virtues. Caroline ran a full household while her husband was deployed, or Caroline organized the base fundraiser without breaking a sweat. Finally, there was Emily, the youngest, 7 years behind me. From birth, she was shielded from discipline, spoiled with excuses, and treated like she could do no wrong. When she dropped out of her first-degree program, Dad called it testing her path. When she racked up credit card debt, he wiped it clean without a word. And then there was me. The middle child who didn't fit neatly into any of his molds. I was neither the flawless officer like Daniel nor the traditional homemaker like Caroline, nor the fragile baby like Emily. I was the one sketching maps in the margins of my notebooks, writing tactical reports with more imagination than protocol, always thinking differently. I excelled academically, earned my commission, and led soldiers through combat operations abroad. My record was filled with strong performance reviews, commendations, and service ribbons. But in my father's eyes, those achievements were never the achievements. When I was recognized for valor, he asked why it wasn't a silver star. When I was promoted to captain, he muttered that it had taken too long. Even when I bought my own home, his only comment was, "Not bad, but what's the point without a husband in it?" Growing up under his command was like living in a constant inspection. He judged every choice, every word, every accomplishment. The rare compliments came sharpened with comparison. And though my mother had passed away when I was young, leaving him to raise us with his rigid expectations, he never allowed for softness. My father's way was the Army way. Orders, hierarchy, duty above all else. The message was clear. No matter what I did, I would never be enough. Even during the milestones that should have mattered most, the imbalance was blatant. When I graduated with honors from officer candidate school, he skipped the ceremony for a golf tournament with senior brass. When my consulting firm landed its first major defense contract, I brought the news home only to have the subject switched back to Daniel's promotion and Caroline's children. Even the family photos told the story. Daniel and Caroline posed proudly beside him in the center, Emily perched comfortably nearby, while I was angled slightly off to the side, like an afterthought in my own family portrait. Year after year, I played the role of the dutiful soldier daughter, showing up, smiling, hoping one day he'd see me for who I truly was. But by the time I reached my 30s, the hope was wearing thin. What my father never understood, or perhaps refused to see, was that I had built a life I was proud of, piece by piece, through grit and sacrifice. The Army forged me, but when I stepped into civilian life, I created something new. A consulting practice that helped defense companies modernize strategies and technology. It wasn't easy. I started with nothing but a laptop in a cramped apartment, running on black coffee and discipline. I built my reputation client by client, rejection by rejection. And when the contracts finally started coming in, I poured everything back into the business, hiring veterans who needed a second chance after service. By the time I turned 30, I had moved into an office overlooking the Potomac, with a small but battle-tested team working under me. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. Built not from my father's shadow but from my own sweat, my own fight. The real breakthrough came when my firm secured a contract with Titan Arms, a mid-sized weapons manufacturer looking to modernize its image and win larger defense bids. 4 months, my team and I worked day and night, shaping a strategy that combined battlefield credibility with forward-looking innovation. When Titan rolled out the new brand, their contracts spiked by over 30% in the first quarter, drawing attention across the industry. That win opened doors. Within 2 years, I was advising 3 national defense companies and dozens of regional suppliers. My 5-person staff grew into a full-time unit of veterans and analysts I personally trained. I was asked to speak at national security forums, and my name started appearing in industry journals. Revenue passed $500,000 annually, but I lived carefully, reinvesting profits, paying off my condo, and stacking a retirement fund that could weather any storm. Outside of work, my life was full in ways my family never knew. I'd been with Mark, a structural engineer and former Marine, for 3 years. He wasn't intimidated by my career or my father's shadow. Instead, he grounded me, patient, steady, and proud of who I was. I had friends who felt like siblings in ways my actual siblings never had. My best friend from deployment, Elena, lived nearby, and we met weekly to share a meal or a hike. My firm had become my second family, celebrating milestones together, backing each other when things got hard. I even found space for myself outside the uniform. Pottery classes on Wednesday nights, trail runs on weekends, volunteering at a program that taught military kids how to channel stress through art. Slowly, I was stitching together a life built on my terms. And yet, beneath all that progress, there was an ache I couldn't shake. I still wanted my father's respect, the acknowledgement that I wasn't the failed child he had cast me as years ago. That hunger drove me to repeat a dangerous pattern, becoming the family's silent safety net. First it was small. A loan to my father when the alternator went out on his truck. Then covering part of Emily's tuition when Dad said the GI Bill benefits had run thin. But soon the calls came like clockwork, each one framed as if I was merely doing my duty. Roof repairs are overdue. Your brother's got a cash flow problem. Medication costs have gone up. Dad never asked directly, he didn't have to. He'd sigh, mention the burden, and let the silence stretch until I stepped in. And when I did, there was no gratitude, only the reminder. That's what family does. After everything we gave you, it's the least you can do. The worst was Daniel. Outwardly, he was the picture of success. Uniform pressed, chest full of ribbons. But behind the facade, he was drowning in debt from reckless investments and a lifestyle far beyond his means. 3 years ago he came to me desperate, facing foreclosure. I bailed him out, $20,000 the first time, then more, with promises of repayment that never materialized. No one else in the family knew. To them he was still the perfect officer, the prodigal son. Meanwhile, I was quietly underwriting family gatherings, footing the bill for birthdays and holidays while Dad took the credit for his generosity. When he needed a tailored suit for a ceremony, I bought it and let him believe it was a bargain find. When he wanted new appliances, they appeared as if from nowhere, paid for by me, attributed to the family. The more I gave, the less it mattered. What I saw as sacrifice, they saw as obligation. My father especially treated my support as nothing more than a debt being collected. No thanks, no recognition, just the unspoken command to do more. And despite everything I'd built for myself, the firm, the friends, the stability, I found myself shrinking every time I stepped into their presence. I became that silenced cadet again, desperate for approval, laughing off insults, hiding achievements so I wouldn't be accused of arrogance. Mark would watch me come home drained after every visit, shaking his head. "Why do you keep going back there, Rachel? Why do you let them bleed you dry?" I never had a good answer. Only that they were family. And family was supposed to mean something. But with each passing year, with every dig disguised as advice, every demand disguised as duty, my patience thinned. Resentment built. And the soldier in me, the part trained never to accept disrespect, was waking up. Later that autumn, during a rare dinner I attended at my father's home, he delivered one of those quiet cuts that always seemed to slice deeper than his barking critiques ever could. While I helped clear plates and scrub pans, he leaned against the counter and said with absolute certainty, "It's probably for the best you bury yourself in contracts and briefings. You were never cut out for raising a family anyway." The words sat heavy like shrapnel under the skin. I drove home with a pounding headache, promising myself I wouldn't return for Christmas. But as the season drew closer, two forces battled inside me: the iron guilt he'd drilled into me since childhood, and the fragile hope that maybe this time he might actually see me. At his birthday dinner in early December, that hope was crushed again. We sat in a polished officers' club downtown, the bill quietly charged to my card though it was paraded as his treat. Through the entire meal he catalogued Daniel's promotions, Caroline's perfect children, Emily's latest steps toward maturity. I waited for a moment to share my own victory. My firm had been profiled in Defense Quarterly, but as soon as the words left my mouth, he waved them aside and pivoted to Emily's unpaid internship. Her third failed attempt at a career was celebrated, while my national recognition was discarded. By the time the invitation for Christmas dinner arrived, my chest tightened at the thought of stepping foot in that house again. I rehearsed excuses, crafted exit strategies, but every plan dissolved under the weight of obligation. It was Mark, steady, clear-eyed Mark, who finally forced the question. "Rach, you're not that cadet anymore," he told me one night as I paced the living room like I was briefing for combat. "You've commanded soldiers. You run your own company. You deserve respect." "They'll never change," I snapped back. "Going there is walking into the same ambush every year." "Then change how you respond," he countered, voice firm. "Stop waiting for them to see your worth. Start showing them that you know it." His words stayed with me like an order I couldn't ignore. In the days before Christmas I went through the motions but with a different fire. I chose thoughtful, expensive gifts and wrapped them like precision work, as if flawless presentation might force acknowledgement. I booked a professional to style my hair and uniformed myself in a tailored dress that radiated authority instead of apology. I decided this year if battle came I wouldn't retreat. Then on Christmas Eve came the call that nearly broke me. Daniel's voice was hushed, nervous, like he'd ducked into a stairwell to avoid being overheard. "Rach, I hate to even ask this but I'm cornered. The bank's threatening foreclosure if I don't make a payment by New Year's. I need 15 grand. Just to hold them off until my commission bonus clears in February." I closed my eyes. I'd known this call was coming before he even dialed. "Daniel, you already owe me. You've barely paid back the last loan." I know," he rushed. "But this is different. It's my house, Rach. Diane and the kids, where are they supposed to go if we lose it? Please. And don't tell Dad. You know how he sees me. He still thinks I'm bulletproof." 15,000. Not pocket change even with my stability. It was money earmarked for my firm's expansion, for equipment I'd waited 2 years to afford. But as he begged, my silence became consent. I wired the money, adding another tally to debts I knew would never come back. When I hung up, I dialed Elena. She listened quietly, then dropped the hammer I didn't want to hear. "You've got to stop being their ATM," she said flatly. "These are grown adults. You're not their commanding officer, you're their sister. Let him feel the consequences of his choices for once." So I just let them lose the house. I shot back. Let my niece and nephew live out of a motel? Maybe that's what finally forces him to grow up. But more importantly, Rach, when are you going to grow up in this dynamic? When are you going to demand the respect you've already earned 10 times over? Her words collided with marks in my head, pounding louder than my father's voice ever had. For the first time I let the anger rise instead of choking it down. I was done being their silent bank. Done being dismissed. Done shrinking to fit a role my father had assigned decades ago. That night as I fell asleep I made myself a promise. This Christmas would not end the way all the others had. I would not sit at that table quietly absorbing fire. If they couldn't see my worth I'd spell it out for them. And if it set the whole house ablaze, so be it. The next afternoon, I pulled up to my father's 2-story brick home at precisely 1,600 hours. The place looked like a base inspection. White lights traced the roofline, a wreath centered on the red door, candles glowing in every window exactly as they had every year of my childhood. I loaded my arms with wrapped gifts from the trunk and marched to the front door, my pulse steady, my resolve set. Through the walls I heard laughter, clinking glasses, the kind of warmth I'd longed for but never been allowed to share in fully. For a moment my armor cracked. I wanted to belong. The door opened and there was my father. General Hayes. No medals, just an old reindeer sweater stretched across broad shoulders. His eyes crinkled as if he were genuinely glad to see me. "Rachel. You came." He stepped aside, his voice softer than usual. Merry Christmas, Dad. I forced a smile, shifted the boxes and gave him a quick embrace before asking, "Can you help me with the rest from the car?" He raised a brow at the sight of so many packages but followed me out without question. As we hauled the gifts inside, he spoke of traffic, weather, anything but feelings. That was his way: keep the conversation safe, keep the truth buried. The house smelled of roasted turkey and pine. The Christmas tree towered over a sea of presents. Photos lined the mantel: Daniel's family beaming, Caroline's children framed in gold, Emily's college snapshots, and one small aging picture of me in uniform, tucked almost out of sight. From the kitchen, my father's voice thundered orders: "Dinner in 20, get the wine poured." And then he emerged, apron dusted with flour, eyes scanning me with the same precision he once used on recruits. His gaze flicked over my dress, my hair, the carefully chosen gifts. "You're finally here," he said, as if I'd kept the entire operation waiting, though I was precisely on time. He jerked his chin toward the tree. "Put those down and come greet the others. Daniel's giving us an update on his command." Caroline brought her casserole. No Merry Christmas. No acknowledgement of effort. Just another assignment to complete. I swallowed the sting, set the packages under the tree and followed him into the living room. For the next hour, it was a parade of forced smiles and clipped exchanges. Caroline gave me a polite hug before launching into her daughter's recital story. Daniel clapped my shoulder with that same overconfidence, but the deep lines around his eyes betrayed more than he said. Emily barely looked up from her phone. The battlefield had been set. And this time I wasn't leaving without firing back. Daniel's wife, Diane, tried to soften the tension with a kind smile in my direction, the only gesture all evening that felt remotely genuine. Emily, home once again after abandoning yet another academic program, barely glanced up from her phone long enough to register that I'd even entered the room. When it came time to open presents, my carefully chosen gifts were received with the same lukewarm gratitude I'd come to expect. The dress uniform I had purchased for my father, a rare collector's piece honoring his division's historic campaign, was brushed off with a flat "thank you," as if he had no idea of its value. For my stepmother, a premium spa retreat and silk scarf drew little more than a nod before she quickly returned to orchestrating the distribution of other packages. My siblings gave half-hearted acknowledgments when unwrapping the limited edition memorabilia I had hunted down for them, but their enthusiasm quickly shifted back to their own conversations and the shinier gifts piling under the tree. When dinner was announced, the seating chart felt like a battle formation designed to remind me of my rank in the family. My father took his throne at the head of the long table, my stepmother beside him. Daniel and Caroline occupied the spots of honor close at hand, surrounded by their spouses and children. Emily perched comfortably at my stepmother's side. I was stationed at the far end, isolated except for my 10-year-old nephew, who was too busy stabbing at mashed potatoes to notice the symbolism. The table gleamed with ceremony, crystal glasses catching the chandelier's light, polished silver cutting through slices of turkey, stuffing, cranberries, casseroles lined up like soldiers on parade. But as conversation flowed, it curved around me like a current around a rock. My father questioned Daniel with interest, nodding approvingly as my brother inflated his sales numbers and bragged about potential promotions, all of us pretending not to know about the debts drowning him. He even boasted about a luxury vacation he was planning, and I had to drain half my wine glass to keep from mentioning the foreclosure payment I had covered for him less than a week earlier. Caroline took over next, painting the table with endless stories of her children's accomplishments and her volunteer campaigns at their exclusive school. My stepmother hung on every word, asking for more details, her pride practically glowing. Then for the first time since I had sat down, she turned her gaze to me. "You know, Rachel," she said, her voice clipped but deliberate, "you ought to consider volunteering somewhere. It would be good for you to meet people instead of spending all your time buried in that consulting work." Before I could respond, Caroline interjected smoothly, dismissing me with a smile. "Oh, Mom, you know Rachel's busy with her little projects. Not everyone has the time for service." Her tone was condescending enough to imply my entire career was just a hobby. I placed my glass down deliberately. "Actually, I volunteer twice a month with a veterans youth program," I said evenly. "And my firm donates time and resources to nonprofit organizations every quarter." A brief silence fell. Acknowledgement hanging in the air for only a heartbeat before my stepmother waved it away. "That's nice," she said flatly, then turned to Emily. "Tell everyone about your new internship, dear." Emily launched into a story about her unpaid magazine position, a role she'd already complained to me about hating. My father and stepmother listened attentively, offering encouragement as though she were breaking ground on a new career. When a lull finally came, I decided to insert my own news. "My firm was featured in Defense Quarterly last month," I said, keeping my tone calm. "They did a 4-page spread on our work for Clearwater Systems." My stepmother raised a brow. "Oh, is that one of those online newsletters?" "No," I corrected. "It's one of the most respected publications in the defense industry. Being featured is an honor." "Speaking of honors," she said, pivoting immediately, "Caroline, did you tell Rachel about Chloe making the honor roll again?" The spotlight shifted, my achievement discarded mid-sentence. My chest burned, but I reminded myself, I didn't need their validation for my success to be real. Dessert was served and then, unexpectedly, it was Daniel who circled back. "Hey, Clearwater Systems," he said, pausing mid-slice of pie. "That rebrand I saw in the papers, that was your team, wasn't it?" Caught off guard, I nodded. "Yes. We redesigned their entire visual identity and interface. It was a 6-month project." "That's impressive, Rach," he said quietly, almost sincerely. "Those guys are huge." For a moment I felt something rare, a flicker of recognition. "Thank you," I replied, genuinely touched. But then my stepmother sneered. "I doubt they paid much. Probably just some new fonts and colors." She clinked her fork against her plate. "Now who wants coffee with their pie?" The heat rose in my cheeks. I set my fork down and spoke, steady but sharp. It wasn't just fonts. It was a full-scale rebrand that increased their engagement by 40%. That contract alone was worth over $200,000. The room went still. My father's eyebrows shot up. Caroline froze mid-bite. Even Emily set her phone down. My stepmother's face hardened. "There's no need to exaggerate. Everyone knows consulting is barely a step above making posters." "I'm not exaggerating," I said firmly. "My firm employs 7 people full-time. We generate over $500,000 a year." She set her fork down with a metallic clink, her eyes narrowing. "If that's true, then why are you still living alone in that tiny apartment? Why aren't you married with a family like your sister? Success isn't just money, Rachel. You've always been our dreamer, lost in your own little world." The words struck like a slap, but I didn't flinch. "My condo is over 2,000 square feet. You've never even visited." She waved a hand dismissively. "At your age, you should have more to show for your life than contracts and an empty home. Caroline has given us grandchildren. Daniel has a career with honor. Even Emily is finding her way." The tension around the table thickened. My father cleared his throat. "Nancy, perhaps this isn't the time." But she leaned in, her voice dropping to that cutting register I'd known my whole life. "Let's be honest. You've always been different. We tried to guide you, but you insist on this lifestyle. No husband, no children, just clients who could replace you tomorrow. The truth is," she paused, each word deliberate, "you are the most useless child we have." The air turned to ice. Daniel stared at his plate. Caroline shifted uncomfortably. My father half rose, but no words came. Emily's eyes widened. Something inside me snapped, not my will but the chains I'd worn for decades. I stood slowly, napkin dropping to the floor, chair scraping against wood like a rifle bolt sliding into place. My voice was calm but sharp as a blade. "Then stop calling me when you need money." The silence was absolute. My stepmother's face drained of color, her mouth opening but no words forming. My father's confusion twisted into alarm. Daniel wouldn't meet my eyes. Diane's gaze darted to him, questions already forming. Caroline froze with her fork midair. Emily's tears brimmed, her voice small. "Rach." But I wasn't done. Years of silence poured out like artillery fire I could no longer hold back. "Let me tell you what useless looks like," I said, voice rising. "Useless isn't the one who built a business from nothing. Useless isn't the one who paid for Dad's truck repairs. Useless isn't the one who covered half of Emily's tuition when you claimed you couldn't. Useless isn't the one who saved Daniel's house from foreclosure. 3 times. 15,000 just last week, Daniel. On top of the $27,000 you already owe me. Diane gasped, whipping toward him. Daniel, is that true? You told me your bonus covered it. Daniel's face crumbled. Ratch, you promised not to. No, I cut him off. What I did was cover for you. I've been covering for all of you. Pretending everything was fine while I bankrolled this family. I turned back to my stepmother, her fury barely masking her fear. You called me every month for 5 years. The new fridge. Me. The roof repairs. Me. Dad's medication the insurance wouldn't cover? Me. Over $100,000 in the past 3 years, and not once did I hear a thank you. Not once did anyone acknowledge that my so-called useless career has been keeping this family afloat. My father collapsed back into his chair, face pale. I didn't know. She told me it was covered. Of course you didn't, I said, my tone softening for him. No one was supposed to know. That was the family secret, that the disappointment was the one saving you all. The truth lay on the table now, heavy as steel. And for the first time I wasn't the one shrinking under its weight. It had always been the family's unspoken truth, that the disappointment of the Hayes clan was the one who kept bailing everyone else out. Caroline was the first to break the silence, her voice tentative. But Rachel, you never said anything. You always brushed it off like it was nothing when we needed help. I swallowed hard, my words sharper than I expected. Because I wanted to matter here. I thought if I could just be useful enough, vital enough, one day you'd look at me and actually see me. But that day was never coming, was it? I scanned their stunned faces, feeling oddly steady. The reality is I've built something I'm proud of. I run a company that employs 7 people. I own my home outright. I have investments, savings, a retirement plan. I have friends who treat me like family, and a man who respects me in ways none of you have even bothered to know. By every measure, I'm not just fine. I'm thriving. But in this family, none of that counts because I didn't follow the script. My father's jaw was clenched tight, his tone icy. You have no right to parade private business at my table. If you chose to help, that was your decision. Family looks after each other. That doesn't give you license to throw it in our faces. I locked eyes with him. No, Dad. What family does is stand by one another emotionally, not just financially. What family does is celebrate each other's successes, carry one another through failures, and accept who we truly are, not force us into molds that make them more comfortable. Exhaustion hit me then, but I pushed through. For years I've tried to earn your respect by being the fixer, the reliable soldier who patches holes. But I get it now. You never wanted a daughter who succeeded, you wanted one who obeyed. The fallout spread like fire through dry brush. Diane turned sharply to Daniel, whispering with urgency, her face pale. You told me we were fine. We just bought a new car. Is this why we're drowning in debt? To impress your father. Daniel's shoulders hunched, his voice low but defensive. Everyone expects me to look successful. I couldn't show weakness. Caroline looked uncomfortable, her voice quieter than I'd ever heard it. Rachel, I honestly had no idea. You should have said something. Would it have mattered? I shot back. Would you have stopped treating me like I was beneath you? Would Dad have stopped comparing me to Daniel at every turn? At least she had the decency to look ashamed. I never meant to make you feel small, she admitted. I just got used to being the favorite. Emily's tears spilled over, her voice breaking. Wait, you paid half my tuition? They told me it was a second mortgage. I nodded, my anger softening for her. They didn't want you to know the truth. They didn't want anyone to see that the general's family wasn't as bulletproof as it pretended to be. Then my father stood, shoulders sagging, his voice deeper and steadier than I'd heard in years. She's right. We haven't been honest with ourselves or with her. And we haven't treated her fairly. He turned toward my stepmother, his gaze unyielding. Nancy, our daughter deserves an apology. But she bristled, her tone sharp as steel. This is absurd. She chose to hand out money. No one forced her. And if she expects gratitude for it, then maybe it wasn't giving at all. The final confirmation of what I already knew. There would be no apology. No real change. Not tonight, maybe not ever. I straightened, calmer than I'd ever felt. You're right about one thing. No one forced me. I gave because I loved you. But I'm choosing differently now. I walked away from the table, climbed the stairs to the guest room and packed my overnight bag. The posters and medals on the walls were relics of a girl who'd never been enough. As I zipped the bag, voices downstairs rose. Arguments breaking out, the carefully polished facade of the Hayes family cracking wide open. When I came back down, my father intercepted me, his face pale. "Rachel, don't leave like this. We can fix it." I touched his arm gently. "Dad, this can't be fixed with one conversation. This has been decades in the making. I need space. And so does this family." His eyes filled with regret. "I didn't know. About the money, about how much this hurt you. I should have seen it." He pulled me into a rare embrace, his voice cracking. "I am proud of you. I should have said that years ago." My throat tightened. "I know. And that's part of the problem. You didn't want to see it." From the dining room came the rising storm. My stepmother's furious voice, Daniel and Diane arguing, Caroline trying and failing to restore calm. It was the sound of decades of silence unraveling. I stepped out into the cold night air, shut the door firmly behind me, and sat in my car. My hands gripped the wheel as tears blurred the Christmas lights lining the street. But it wasn't sorrow that filled me, it was release. For the first time in my adult life, I had spoken my truth without apology. Driving home felt surreal. Families and houses along the way glowed with holiday warmth while my own had fractured behind me. Yet with every mile the burden lifted. By the time I parked, the tension of years had drained out in waves of tears. Inside my condo, my phone buzzed endlessly. 17 missed calls. 23 unread messages. I ignored them until I was ready, then finally answered Mark's. "Rach, are you okay? You were supposed to call after dinner. I've been worried sick." I broke down, recounting every detail. The insult, the confrontation, the silence, the explosion. When I finished, his response was simple. "I'm proud of you. That took more courage than any deployment you've ever been on." "It doesn't feel like courage," I whispered. "It feels like I just blew up my entire family." "Maybe that's exactly what needed to happen," he said gently. "Sometimes things have to burn down before they can be rebuilt the right way." For the first time, I allowed myself to believe he might be right. "Thank you for noticing," I said, surprised by the unfamiliar softness in my father's tone. Silence stretched between us, taut like a drawn bowstring. He fussed with the refrigerator door before finally turning to face me squarely, his voice measured. "I want you to know. I've been seeing someone." My brow furrowed. "Someone?" "A therapist," he clarified quickly, catching my confusion. "Your stepmother insisted. After everything." I froze. The man who once barked that therapy was for the weak, who believed problems were solved with grit, orders, and silence, was admitting he was in counseling. "That's good to hear," I managed, careful not to sound incredulous. He straightened a dish towel with military precision, as though order in his hands might steady the disorder of his words. "I don't agree with half the things she says," he muttered, a trace of his old defensiveness flaring. "But she's made me think differently. About expectations. About control. About why I had to shove everyone into roles that made sense to me." I didn't interrupt. Years of experience told me breaking his rhythm would shut him down. "I was raised to believe there's one path," he continued. "Academy. Commission. Marriage. Kids. In that order. You climb the ladder, you honor the uniform, you give the country your best years. Anything outside that formula meant failure. When you chose another way, I took it as rejection, not just of tradition but of me." "It wasn't rejection," I said quietly. "It was me finding my own road." He gave a stiff nod. "My therapist said the same. That your choices were about you, not about me." A short, humorless laugh escaped him. "Apparently, I've made a career out of turning everything into a referendum on me." The flicker of self-awareness, though reluctant, was staggering. "I'm not going to apologize for wanting what I thought was best," he said, his jaw still set. "But I can admit I was rigid. And I said things I shouldn't have. Things that hurt." Not an apology in the traditional sense, but from him, it was monumental. A strange blend of validation, hurt, and cautious hope rose in me. "Thank you for telling me," I said softly. "It matters." He gave a single sharp nod as though closing a deal. Then, with a glance toward the living room, he added, "Your Mark seems solid. Dependable. The kind of man who steadies a unit." "He is," I said. "But he's more than steady. He's kind. Creative. He makes me laugh every damn day." For the first time that night, a faint smile tugged at his lips. "Good. That's good. He hesitated, then offered something I never thought I'd hear. I'd like to see your office sometime. See the operation you've built. It was small, but it was an olive branch. I'd like that, I admitted. We returned to the others, the tension not gone but lighter, like the air after a storm. I settled beside Mark on the sofa, and when he squeezed my hand in a silent question, I answered with a squeeze of my own. It's okay. The rest of the evening flowed without the usual undercurrent of knives. Conversation was civil, even warm. When we left for the hotel later that night, there were genuine hugs, promises to meet again soon. Promises that, for once, felt like they might actually hold. In the hotel room, Mark studied me as I recounted the kitchen exchange. Not exactly a tearful reunion, he said. No, I admitted with a small laugh. But for him, it was seismic. He admitted he might have been wrong. I never thought I'd hear those words. Do you think it'll stick? That things will really change, he asked. I thought for a long moment. They already have. Not perfectly. Not completely. But enough to build something different. Something that has room for me as I am, and them as they are. In the months that followed, the uneasy truce became something sturdier. My father visited my office as promised, walking the floors with genuine interest, shaking hands with my staff. We fell into a rhythm of monthly lunches, not always easy but increasingly real. He would likely never fully understand my path, but he was learning to respect it, and I was learning not to measure myself against his approval. My siblings shifted too. Daniel finally repaid most of what he owed, not just in money but in gratitude. Caroline and I discovered shared ground in environmental projects, forging a friendship where rivalry once lived. Emily graduated at last, even spending a summer at my firm, surprising me with a sharp talent for communications. But the greatest change was within me. I spoke at conferences, mentored young officers transitioning into civilian life, even taught part-time at the War College. I no longer measured my worth against my family's silence. I no longer felt compelled to buy love with sacrifice. I knew I was worthy, because I believed it, not because anyone else finally said so. When Mark proposed in spring, I said yes without hesitation. We planned a small wedding on our terms, no committees, no compromises. For once, I didn't fear the whispers about who was invited or who sat where. The following Christmas, my condo hosted the family dinner. The table was crowded, mismatched dishes side by side, laughter weaving through conversations. My father raised a toast, his words simple but weighty, to Rachel, who's taught you what strength really looks like. And across the table he caught my eye and gave me a small, genuine smile. A smile I never thought I'd see. In that moment I understood the hardest lesson. Sometimes you have to risk losing the family you've always known to gain the family it could become. Sometimes love means refusing to accept the unacceptable, even when it feels like betrayal. As I lifted my glass, I looked around the room and realized the recognition I'd fought for all my life had come, not from them but from within myself.